Alright, so welcome back to the channel. Since doing the 1 mile shoot with a 308, did that a while back, I've had tons of comments and stuff, people saying that, well, the reason why we're having so much trouble at 1 mile with 308 is because of the transonic zone, because it's so significant and will absolutely shift your trajectory and will do weird stuff, make your bullets yaw and tumble, and there's no way that they can be accurate once you start going through that transonic zone, which is about Mach 1.2 down to Mach 0.8. So in that area of range, wherever that is for your particular projectile at your particular muzzle velocity, you can't be accurate in that area. Well, I don't know. I just don't think that that's correct. I think that that is maybe a really old FUD way of looking at things, and with modern bullets, as good as they are these days, um, I don't think that the transonic zone really affects them all that much anymore. And at least in my experience, I've not found a quantifiable way to measure it if it does affect it at all. So, I already recorded this video, and then I realized that I made a little bit of a boo-boo. I made a mistake, because then I remembered that my rangefinder is set to actually calculate the AHC or AHC, actual horizontal range. So when I range my target and it ranged it at 1798 yards, we can use our formula for figuring out our right triangle. And because if we know that my firing position is at 1673 feet, and if we know that the target location is at 1288 feet in altitude, we can take the difference, find out that that side of the triangle over there is 385 feet, and we can use that combined with that side of 1798 yards, and we can figure out our hypotenuse, which is 1802.6 yards. So why is that important? Well, the portion of the flight time of the bullet that is affected by gravity is only 1798 yards. But the portion of the flight that is affected by all your environmental factors like wind and humidity and air density and all that stuff is actually further. It's 1802.6 yards, so 4.6 yards further. Now, that is not a very significant distance, but it is important to note that if you were shooting like an extreme angle of up or down, your horizontal range could be wildly different than your actual range. So, just wanted to point that out there before we get into this. Maybe, it probably is far more important to a certain type of person than it is for most people that do this kind of shooting. All right, so some things to get out of the way. Obviously, we don't shoot over a flat piece of land. We're not shooting over just a flat field or anything. So we have some variables here that you guys are not accounting for. All right. So on this pipeline, it is 100 feet wide, and it has trees on both sides of it that are 30 to 40 feet tall. So basically, we've got a shooting lane that is protected from the wind. So where we're actually shooting at and where the target is, basically there is zero wind ever. Okay, so you would think, oh man, that's the perfect scenario. There's no wind. It should be totally easy to hit that target down there at 1800 yards. Well, it would be if we were shooting on flat ground, because then we wouldn't have to worry about the wind pushing the bullet anywhere because it's protected. We're basically shooting in a tunnel, right? Well, that's not the case because of the terrain of the land. as you can see, this is a kind of a rough estimation of what it actually looks like from where we're shooting to where the target is, and we've got this pretty good significant little valley down here. So we could go back to our right triangle, and we actually can find out that our line of sight to the target is negative 4.1 degrees. All right, and then we could, because we know it took 84 minutes of angle dialed up in the scope to get the bullet to the target, because we actually did hit the target at that range at least once, actually multiple times, but you know, that's neither here there nor there. But we are, you know, it took 84 MOA to get there, right? That's what we know for a fact. So if we punch that in, 84 minutes of angle is roughly 1.4 degrees. So our actual angle of departure for, I guess, the angle of the barrel is 1.4 degrees off from our line of sight. It's 1.4 degrees above our line of sight to the target. Now, we can use that information, and we can also just use a ballistic calculator of sorts to find out what our max ordinate is. Okay, and so our max ordinate is 46 feet. Now, if you're thinking, well, you should be able to totally figure out what your wind is 46 feet over the, you know, over the ground. Yeah, you should be able to do that in an ideal situation where your line of sight is going along with the contour of the actual ground, and the ground is just flat. You're right. Your max ordinate would only be 46 feet over the ground. And so you would only have to really be worried about wind that is 46 feet above the ground at its highest point in your trajectory. Now, here is where ours gets complicated, because we're protected by these trees up here, and we're protected by these trees down here. So if we were to put a wind flag at the target, it basically would tell us nothing, and having our having a whatever you call it, anemometer with us, like a little kestrel or something up there at our firing position, would basically tell us nothing too, other than the altitude, you know, barometric pressure, humidity, and all that. So it basically would read 0 for wind because we're in this protected lane right there. Okay. Now, things are going to get complicated, because when the bullet gets out of the tree line on the way to the target and we get out here in the middle, now we've got, our bullet is actually in flight at its highest point about 400 feet above the tree line. You know, that's a rough estimation. Could be a little less, could be a little more, but about 400 feet above the tree line. So now we've got to deal with wind that is 400 feet above the ground. It doesn't have, you know, it's not low to the ground. It doesn't, you know, and if you know anything about this, the higher you get above the ground, typically the higher the wind gets. But now it's going to be really complicated for us to try to get a wind reading that high. We can't stick a windsock 400 feet or 450 feet in the air, can we? I mean, I don't have a mobile way of carrying around a, you know, a freaking radio communications tower to put a windsock on and stick it out there in the middle, right? So that's not going to do me any good. If I were to try to aim and get mirage readings, right? Because that's the next thing, you know, your only other option is to aim your spotting scope somewhere about 60% of the way to the target, and focus in on an area there, and then raise your spotting scope up to the same angle as your angle of departure, and that would give you pretty much where your bullet flight path is for reading mirage. So you'd actually be looking at the mirage in the right location. The only problem with that is, if we use a little straight edge here, we've got this hill in between us. So if I try to get a 60% of the way their focus point on the ground, somewhere about, where that intersects, somewhere in here, that hill's in the way. There's no line of sight to get that focus point. So how do I get my scope to focus in the right spot? I really can't. My other option is to lower my scope back as far as I can, and I could get a focus point about right here. And then if I raise that up to here, well, now I'm reading the mirage, right? But I'm reading it in this area. And, well, our bullet is not that high in the air now. It's only this high in the air because it's on its angle of descent at that point in its trajectory. So it's coming down. And so we're going to be reading mirage in the wrong spot, right? So really, there's no way to read mirage. If I'm looking at the trees and the wind where the trees are, and trying to look at that and see how far the limbs are bending and try to use that method, well, it doesn't really do me any good because, the bullet flight path is so high above the trees. I mean, you can kind of okay, well, I guess it's about 5 miles an hour or so, and then, well, your bullet's another 300 feet higher in the air than where the tree's at, or 400 feet, or whatever. Hell, the wind up there could be 30 miles an hour in the opposite direction, and there's no real way for us to figure that out. Now, I am aware that there is a app for your phone called Ventusky, and supposedly you can use it, and if you put in a certain height above the ground in any given area, you can figure out what the actual wind is up there based on, I guess, some satellite information. I don't know. That's all well and good. I've heard some ELR shooters use this thing a lot, and they like it because it does work. The only problem is, in this area where we're at out in the pipeline, there's no cell phone service. So having an app that I pay, I don't know, however much a month for, just to give me a little bit of information that might be useful, it's not going to do me any good because I won't be able to actually use it in the area that I'm in on any given day, So we're kind of at a real disadvantage here. As you can tell, there's no way for us to really figure out the wind. So as far as those guys, you guys that are saying, oh, the reason why you can't hit the target and the reason why, you're missing so much and blah, blah, blah is because you're shooting through the transonic zone. Or you're shooting a rifle that's not capable of shooting that far, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's totally capable of shooting that far. Shooting long range really doesn't have a lot to do with, if you've got enough elevation range in your scope and you can adjust for it, the bullet's gonna get there. It may not get there as fast as something that shoots a little flatter, has a higher muzzle velocity or whatever, and it's not gonna get there as fast or shoot as flat as something that shoots a projectile with a higher ballistic coefficient. But, it's just math. Getting the bullet, as far as the angle goes, from point A to point B it's just a math problem. The only thing that makes it really complicated is the environmental stuff. The difference in air pressure up here versus air pressure down here and where it declines in the middle, the difference in wind speed front to back or side to side, we can't read that really. And then difference in temperature, because if the sun, if we're shooting early in the morning, the sun's just coming up, well, this area down here is kind of shaded, halfway to the target. The air in the middle of that valley is cold, way colder than it is up here on top where the sun is on us, so that's a factor. There's all kinds of stuff that is going on in this situation that a lot of you guys are not accounting for or don't really understand. So that's the reason why I wanted to explain this in as much detail as I think I can without getting too crazy with it, This is just the basics basic idea. Of course, none of this is exactly to scale, but you know, our max ordinate is not 46 feet. It is like 460 feet or something like that, you know, above the bottom of that valley, which makes it really difficult to figure out what the wind is actually doing there. You know, so Transonic zone, I don't know. Never heard of her. Actually, I have. That's a joke, but I've not actually seen any quantifiable way to measure that's affecting how my rounds are shooting. But what it is affecting is definitely the wind, for sure. And I don't have really a way of reading it. We just kind of take a shot, maybe hold a little left or right, adjust forward a little bit, and then take another shot. And, you know, that's what we do. Again, being able to shoot this far, living in Arkansas, like, this is literally the only place that I know of that's public land that I can go and just play with shooting this far. I don't know anybody that owns private land with enough land to shoot that far on, that's cleared off and flat and all that stuff. So literally, this is the only location in the whole state, probably, that I can go to that's actually accessible with a vehicle and to even get to the area. And I can go to and set up a target and shoot this far, right? So anywhere else in the state, you're not ever going to find a spot where you can shoot that far. Now, there is a 1 mile gun range here in central Arkansas called Twisted Barrel. It's like a long range shooting club type thing. They only allow so many members, and it's very expensive to become a member there. And for something that I only do maybe once every couple months or 3 months, like literally maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I get to actually go out and shoot on this pipeline. It's not cost effective for me to fight my way to become a member of that, you know, exclusive long range shooting deal, to only do something I'm going to do like once to 4 times a year or so. I'm hoping this year, 2025, that I get to go out here more often and do a little more long range shooting. But as far as, for me, like, even in my mind, it doesn't make sense for me to even like know how to shoot this far or know what it takes to shoot that far, you know, because reality is, in the area that I live in, I mean, my furthest shot might be across across a field that's only 100 yards or so, maybe, across the street. Like, there's no reason for me to have capability to do any of this stuff other than it's just a hobby and it's just fun and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the math and the science that it takes to get there. And I plan on doing more of that this year. Plan on getting back into the actual D.O.P.E, the actual math required to do this without using, you know, ballistic calculators, because I've done that in the past, like done all the math and stuff. I've got all the formulas wrote down. I don't remember them offhand, but I do have them, and I do have the capability of actually calculating what it takes by hand without the use of a ballistic calculator. You do need a graphing calculator, I will say that. You are going to have a graphing calculator. Fortunately, most graphing calculators, you know, even though they are battery operated, they require electricity, they will, most of them have a solar panel. So if the battery quits working, the calculator's still going to work, at least out in the daytime when you would be trying to shoot this far. I mean, you're not going to shoot 2,000 yards at night. It's just not going to work out for you very much. But anyway, we're going to do a little more of this type of stuff, showing the whole scenario, show you the real dope on what's going on here, as Rex would say. And yeah, so if you made it this far in the video, maybe you should consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and maybe share this with some friends that might think it's interesting as well. So we'll see you guys next time in the next video. Thanks for watching.